Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nazir Daf Yud. Today's daf is sponsored by Tina Lam in memory of her grandfather Gershon Katz, Gershon ben Yochanan Kohen v'Chaya Tova, whose yurtzeit is today. Okay, we're getting started. We have a really interesting daf, a daf about talking cows and talking doors. Okay, so with that will be the entire content of our daf today. We're going to, again, start with the Mishna and end at the end of that Mishna. So somebody gets up. If you remember yesterday, we had a whole discussion. If I say I'm going to be a Nazir from figs, does that work or not, right? If you haven't yet read Shuli's article about figs, you can do that. I said that wasn't the major focus of our topic yesterday, of our daf, but basically we have this issue of you said you're going to be a Nazir from something that isn't really a usual, doesn't have to do with Nazirut, but you did say the word Nazir. Are you a Nazir? Today we're going to have something a little bit different, but possibly connected, possibly not. And the structure of the Mishnah is going to be exactly the same as yesterday's structure. Amar, somebody gets up and says, Amra parazo, my cow said, or this cow said, Hareini nizira im omedet ani. I will be a nizira, because para is feminine, I will be a nizira if I stand up. What on earth this is and why a para would say this, or right, obviously a para wouldn't say this, but why someone would say that the para said this? No, I didn't say anything about myself. What I said is that the para will be she will be a nizira if she gets up, manages to get up, perhaps we should say. Omer, or I said, hadelet hazeh. Okay, sorry, I didn't say that right. Omer, hadelet hazeh. The door said, here's another statement, the door said, hareini nazirim niftachani. I will be a Nazir if I manage to get myself open. Beit Shamai omrim Nazir, uBeit Hillel omrim eino Nazir. So Beit Shamai, like yesterday, said, this is a statement of taking upon yourself Nazirut, even though you kind of put it in the mouth of the door or the cow, but you basically said, I'm going to be a Nazir. Now, in this case, it's a little different than the previous, because the previous, you just said, I'm going to be a Nazir from growth, right, from figs. Here you said, I'll be a Nazir if something happens. So it's a conditional Nazirut. So you're only going to be a Nazir if the condition is fulfilled. The door gets open, if the cow stands up. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, right now we're not really understanding anything, don't worry. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Af kishe'amru Beit Shamai, exactly as Rabbi Yehuda said yesterday, when Beit Shamai says what they said, that it works, Lo omrim ela ba'omer, hare para zo alai korban im omedet hi. Beit Shamai only meant to say, not Nazir, but Nadur. This is a neder. And it only works if you say what I really meant was to accept the cow or the door upon me as a sacrifice. Remember, you can bring wood and burn it on the altar. So if that's what you said and what you explained, then the para or the door are forbidden to you. But you're not a Nazir. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. We're going to basically put Rabbi Yehuda aside, except that we're going to deal with him. We're going to bring up in our discussion, in our attempts to understand what exactly this Mishna is talking about, we're going to mention Rabbi Yehuda, his line, just to kind of reject an opinion. But otherwise, we're not really dealing with him. But again, it's the same structure as yesterday. What we're going to have today, so the Gemara starts off with a question, a big major question, which we're all asking ourselves. Para mika mishtaya? Does a cow speak? And obviously, does a door speak, right? A door all the more so. What on earth is going on here? So what we're going to have is our structure, very simple structure. Rami bar Hama is going to bring an explanation of the Mishnah. We're going to ask a question, resolve it. We're going to ask another question. Rava is going to ask the second question. And on account of his question, Rava is going to reject Rami bar Hama and suggest an alternative. The problem is within Rava, we're going to have 3 different attempts. Rava is going to start, then we're going to say that doesn't work, and Rava is going to kind of edit, change what he said, and then that's not going to work either. And then we're going to have a final explanation. It doesn't say so, but it seems that that final explanation is also Rava. So the way I want to say the structure, even though it's not 100% clear, we're going to have 3 different readings of Rava. Rava is going to suggest every time they reject, he's going to bring a different suggestion. We're going to end up with 3 different suggestions. Only the final one is going to last. So altogether, we have 4 possibilities of how to understand the Mishnah. And to help you see it visually in the study guide, I went through the flow of the Gemara so you can see all the questions, answers, etc., and where we're up to. And also at the bottom, I put a summary of the 4 so you can see them all up against each other, because then you can compare, oh, what did he change from this one and what did he change from that? It's helpful to see them all together like that. Let's go now one at a time. Amar Rami bar Chama. What is the case here? Higon, and the first part of what he says, everybody agrees. Higon shaita para revutza lefanav. For the most part, the Gemara is going to deal mostly with the cow, even though obviously the questions are the same for the door, and whatever we say for the cow has to fit for the door also. We'll deal with the door here and there, but mostly they're going to use the para as the example. So the para was crouched on the ground and not standing up. Okay, everyone's going to agree that's the case, and the door obviously is stuck. Okay, so now, V'amar, and the person said, now what you have to do today is imagine yourself in a situation, which is not so hard to imagine, where you're trying to fix something and it's just not working, or you're trying to get your cow to stand up and it's just not moving. Okay, I remember this, we did elephant riding once, and they tell you when they take you on the elephant ride, say this is how you get the elephant to move. And if you do this, that's how you get, and you say these words. And of course it didn't work at all. You can't just get an elephant to move by saying a word, like that's not how it works. They have a mind of their own. And, doors sometimes get stuck. And you can imagine the frustration by the person standing there when they're not managing to get the animal up or the door open. And that's what you have to get into, that mindset, to understand what's happening here. And particularly when we get to the second side of the page, it gets even more interesting, where it really helps if you envision this scenario. You try to imagine how frustrated you are in this situation, or how much you want the situation to be resolved. So he says the following: the cow is crouched down on the ground. V'amar, and you say to yourself, now I'll already tell you there's multiple ways to read this Gemara as usual, and I'm going to go with basically one approach, maybe 2 here and there. Some people view this as a bit of a conversation, as if a conversation happened between the cow and the person, which again is more like what the person imagines is going on in the head of the para, and then the person's reaction. Some people just say, no, we're just couching it in as if the para said it, but really it's him speaking. And no one even thinks that we're trying to get into the mind of the cow. So it really depends on your way of explaining. There's different ways of approaches to go with here. So now, what seems to be happening here is, so he gets into the mindset of the para, and he says, look, this cow is struggling to stand up, okay? Or the door is struggling to get open. And then, Hareini Nazir mivsara, what you say is, I'm going to be a Nazir from the flesh of this animal, im amda me'eleha, if she manages to get up. Okay, this is, again, there's different types of vows that we make, and we're going to compare them today. There's I would say the Yaakov type vow or the Chana type vow. If I get what I want, I will vow this to God. Okay, so what are you saying? If, right, as if I'm instead of the para, but if the para manages to get up, then I will basically, I will not eat her flesh. Okay, but in the language of Nazir, I will be a Nazir, which will prevent me from eating her meat. Okay, now, again, some people say, right, it's like the cow is saying, if I manage to get up, all people will be forbidden from eating my meat, and something like that. And then he basically corroborates that and says, okay, so if the animal manages to get up, then, we'll sanctify the animal to the extent that we'll be a Nazir and won't eat her meat. Now, what's the problem with this statement? Nazir is permitted to eat meat. So it's not a typical declaration of Nazirut. Now it sounds, once we get to here, it's basically the previous Mishna. Nazir from figs, which is not actually a Nazir. Nazir from meat, or from, the problem is how we get the basar to connect with the door is a little bit more tricky. In any case, let's keep going. So now he says the following, very simply, right? And then what happened? The animal got up. Now, you promised you're going to be a Nazir if the animal gets up, and the animal managed to get up. So, Beit Shamai l'shitatan u'Beit Hillel l'shitatan. Everybody goes according to what they said in the previous Mishna. Beit Shamai da'amrei min ha'grogrot u'min ha'dvela having Nazir, ha'chanami k'amar mivsara having Nazir. Right, Beit Shamai, you said, if you say I'll be a Nazir from figs or a Nazir, we'll say here, you basically said you're going to be a Nazir from the flesh of the animal. You're a Nazir. Beit Hillel omrim lo having Nazir. Beit Hillel says, what are you talking about? There's no such thing as Nazir from meat. All Nazirim are allowed to eat meat. So you made a meaningless statement. You're not a Nazir. To which the Gemara asks question number 1, which I told you already is going to be resolved. Well, then this Mishnah is the exact same Mishnah as the previous. Beit Shamai already said this. Beit Hillel already said this. Why do we need to say the exact same thing over again? So Hama and Rava, Tarte Tzlach, they bring 2 or 3 cases, right? 2 or 3 basically meaning last Mishnah and our Mishnah, but our Mishnah splits into 2. So it's basically 2 to 3 cases. V'chein tana Rabbi Chia, Tarte Tzlach, and Rabbi Chia also brought a braita that said, this, right? The Mishnah brought 2 or 3 cases. V'chein ama Rabbi Yoshaya, Tarte Tzlach. Basically, they're all 3 saying the same thing, which is there's 2 or 3 cases saying the same thing, which we're obviously going to need now at Shrife. Why do you need all 3 cases? So right now we're in Rami bar Chama's first explanation, just to review, who says that basically the animal's not getting up. The animal really is trying to get up. The person sees the animal struggling, says basically, I'm kind of as if talking for the para. If you manage to get up, is what he's saying, even though he doesn't say it that way. He says, right, the para said, basically saying, I will be a Nazir if the para gets up. And according to Beit Shamai, he's a Nazir, even though he said, I'll be a Nazir from the flesh of the animal, okay, even though there's no such thing. Could be, I'll be a Nazir from the wood of the door, even though there's no such thing, okay? Utsrichi. Why do you need all 3 cases now to say that they argue? Well, Iatmar Baha, we're going to now say what's unique in each one. I also charted this out. What's unique in each one, that from there you wouldn't have necessarily learned to the other. Beha grogro dutvela, if it's figs, then Hadran Michelle Beit Shamai habi Nazir. Mishum demichla pam ba'anavim. Okay, we're in the week of Tu B'Shvat, right? They're not so far off figs and grapes. They're both part of the 7 minim that Israel is praised for. And now it's funny. Yesterday we said everybody knows that there's no such thing as a Nazir from figs. All of a sudden we shift gears here and say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe it's 7. It's not so far off from being grapes. It's not that different from grapes. But basar ba'anavim lo michlaf, but meat with grapes, nobody confuses meat and grapes. Those are 2 very different things. So you might have thought that maybe if we only had the previous Mishnah, Beit Shamai maybe only said it in the previous Mishnah, but in our Mishnah, maybe they would say, oh, you're not a Nazir if you talk about not eating meat. Nazir has absolutely nothing to do with not eating meat. There are certain fruits a Nazir can't eat. So figs, grapes, people might have confused. V'iyatmar basal, what if you just had the case of meat? Let's say our Mishnah with the para only. Then you'd be able to learn if meat, which is already far off, let's say number 5 on the scale, farther off from, or number 3 on the scale, right? Farther from number 10, if you put it like that, farther from grapes, and that works according to Beit Shamai, then obviously the figs would work. So you wouldn't need that Mishnah. Well, no, because you could flip the logic and say, Hachu da'amri Beit Shamai havi Nazir b'bisra b'chamra. Aval gro tu tvela lo. What do you mean? Meat and wine always go together, right? We always put meat and wine together. There's this restaurant in Israel called Meat and Wine. Those are things that go together. But figs and grapes, not necessarily. So this is saying the opposite logic, right? I would put figs and grapes more at number 3, and the figs more at number 3, and the wine more at number 7. Wine, we know on Tisha, in the 9 days you can't drink wine, you can't eat meat. Those often go together also halachically. So kamash malan. That's why you need both the first 2 Mishnayot, because you could make each argument in either direction and you wouldn't necessarily be able to learn the other. But what about it marhane tarte? Let's say you had those 2. Well then, right, what would you say? Obviously then you'd need the door also, because nobody thinks door to Nazir is like 0 to 10, right? There's no connection whatsoever. So you would have said, Hani hutakam Beit Shamai. In those cases of the cow and the wine, the cow and the meat, you would say Deka'amre Beit Shamai. That's where Beit Shamai says you're a Nazir. Aval delet, but a door? Beit Hillel. Maybe Beit Shamai would agree with Beit Hillel. That is definitely not Nazir. There's no such thing as a Nazir from a door. Now, Itana delet. Now, and remember, Beit Shamai thinks it is. You said Nazir from a door, you are a Nazir, which is a little bit insane. Itana delet, if you just had the door case, well, that would be perfect then. You just had the door case, and Beit Shamai says you're a Nazir. Of course, then he's going to say you're a Nazir if you said figs, and of course he's going to say you're a Nazir if you said meat. So why do you need the other cases? But because there's Beit Shamai and Beit Hillel, that's why you need the other cases, because then you would think, Kaha Kamre Beit Hillel. In that case, Beit Hillel says you're not a Nazir in the door case, but maybe Beit Hillel will agree in the other cases that you're closer on the scale to a Nazir, and therefore, Vabahak Tarte, the other two, you might have thought Beit Hillel would agree with Beit Shamai, you're actually a Nazir. That's why you needed all three cases. So the first question, Rami bar Hama, is if you really think that what means here is, again, the para is crouching, can't get up, the cow, you say, I see the para is struggling. It's as if the para wants to say, I'm going to be a Nazir if I manage to get up. And basically what you're doing is saying, I'm doing it on the behalf of the cow, and I'm saying, right? And again, you could view this as there's a bit of a discussion going on. Some of the commentaries say, no, you really just want this para to get up. If we go back to what I said, imagine a situation where you're very frustrated, you can't get your cow up. And basically what you're saying is, I want this cow to get up, and so much so that I promise I'll be a Nazir from the meat of the cow if this cow actually stands up. And since meat, could, even though it's not really connected to Nizigut at all, but we basically say you're a Nazir because you said in the end Nazir. So you must have really meant Nazir, right? We kind of ignored the second part. That was the whole thing we said yesterday, right? You wouldn't say it unnecessarily, right? Whereas Beit Hillel doesn't think so at all, because Beit Hillel says, what do you mean? You kind of undid it by saying the flesh of it, right? The meat, which is not Nazir. Okay, that's option number one. However, there's a big problem here, which is this is only, now, according to Rami bar Hama, the issue is this. You're basically saying, I want the para to get up, but you're saying it basically, what he says is, you're basically saying, go cow, go, go cow, go. And if the cow gets up on its own, that's your success. So comes Rava and says, if that's the real issue, that you want this cow to be able to muster up its strength and stand up on its own, then comes Rava and says, Amarava, mi katane im amdame eleha. It doesn't say, if your whole thing is getting the cow to muster up her strength and stand up on her own, it should have said that in the Mishnah, because that's your whole focus. You're saying the whole issue is you want this cow to be able to stand up on its own. But it doesn't say that. It just says imomedet, if she gets up. Getting up could be you pick her up, someone else comes along and picks her up, or the cow gets up on her own. So if really your whole thing was this cow is struggling, you want to get the cow to feel, oh, wow, I did it, I got up on my own, it would have said so in the Mishnah. So Rava rejects this reading based on that. And Ela Amar Rava. And here comes option number one of Rava. I told you this already. All of this situations, all four, because we're going to end up with four, because within Rava there's three, and we have Rami bar Hama as one. We're going to have the cow is crouching and can't get up. Ve'amal harei alai korban. And he said, this cow will be to me as a korban. What does that mean? This cow will be to me as a korban? Korban, well, korban connects with Nazir. I'm going to bring this as a korban Nazir. You didn't say the word Nazir. That was missing here. Okay, even though what's funny is Rava said, it should have said this if you're saying that, and he actually changes a little bit the wording. I mean, it does say Areini Nazir, but basically you're saying, I promise to bring this as a korban when I finish my nizigut. Now, there's a bit of a problem with this, which is you might remember, you might not, but a para, a cow, is not one of the sacrifices for Nazir. So that's a little bit strange. The Rush answers that by saying that the para, what he means, often when people brought korban Nazir, they brought extra voluntary offerings, okay, as if 3 korbanot wasn't enough. They added voluntary korbanot offerings, and what he meant is I'll bring this as an additional voluntary offering on the day I come to the temple to bring my sacrifice. Okay, it's a possible reason. It at least addresses the question, which is, I was pleased to find someone who addressed that question, because I was wondering, my yam paraya, it's a harsina, as they say, right? What was that have to do with anything about Naz? So, and then Beit Shamai says, you obviously meant korban Nazir, you didn't say, but it's good enough. And basically the Beit Hillel will say, no, that's not the way you take upon Nizirut. So Bishlama para bat korban hi. Okay, so that works for the cow, because a cow can be a korban. Aval delit bat korbani, but a door can't be a sacrifice. So it's weird to be saying now, even though theoretically there are wood offerings, but that's not what you're going to be saying when you're coming to bring your sacrifices as a Nazir. Oh, I'm bringing some wood as I'm dedicating this to the temple. It's a little bit strange. So it doesn't make any sense with the door case, in which case we're back to square one. So now Rava is going to suggest option number 2. Ela Amar Rava, and that's why I wanted you to see in the structure. In this case, it says in answer number 2 of Rava, it says, but Rava said, meaning Rava changed and Rava edited it. In the third, after we reject this, there's going to be a third answer, and it doesn't say the words Ela Amar Rava. So it's not 100% clear. I put it in the sheet as if it was, and in the summary on the page, as if it was a third explanation of Rava. But you'll see why it seems pretty clear it's a third explanation of Rava, because it's a minor variation on option number 2 of Rava. But it doesn't say the words Ela Amar Rava, so there's a bit of lack of clarity here, but that's a minor thing. Ela Amar Rava. Again, kigon shayta pararu v'tzal lefanav. So again, I told you all of them are, the cow is crouched and can't get up. And here, I really want you to imagine you're in this situation, okay? Now, what are your emotions? And it could be depending on what kind of person you are. So, Amal, we're now on Amud Bet. Hareini Nazir miyayin. Okay, now we're going to resolve it. It's clearly you're a Nazir from wine, okay? We're not saying from the meat of the animal, and we're not getting into all that. I'm a Nazir from wine, a real legit Nazir. Everything in that is perfect. And then the machloket Beit Shamai Beit Hillel has nothing to do with the previous Mishnah. It's a different machloket. Im lo amda. Now, you're basically saying, this cow is not getting up. I'm macho. I'm strong. I'm going to get this cow up. And now, instead of saying, if I'm successful, I will be a Nazir, like we explained before, as I said, the Yaakov Chana type of neder from the Torah, where if this happens, I will sanctify this to God. No, this is the challenge Nazir. It's, if I don't succeed, my punishment is I will be a Nazir. Okay, so this is saying I will get this cow to stand up. Okay, like I was on the elephant. I will get this elephant to move. Right? If it takes all my strength, I will succeed. And if I don't succeed, I will be a Nazir. Okay, so Hareini Nazir miyayin im lo amda. Now it's a little weird because the language is amda if it doesn't stand up, but it's clear from the continuation of the Gemara that they mean if I don't get it to stand up. So if I don't succeed, I will be a Nazir. But I'm right. I'm geared up to succeed in getting this cow to stand up. What happened then? Ve'amda me'eleha, and then the cow got up on her own. Now the big question is, was that a fulfillment of my condition or not a fulfillment of my condition? What was I looking for? Was I looking for, and here's the machloket Beit Shamai Beit Hillel. So remember, Beit Shamai says I'm a Nazir. Why am I a Nazir? Because what did I say? I'll be a Nazir if I don't succeed in getting this cow to get up. I did not succeed in getting this cow to get up. The cow got up on its own. So, and with the door, what is it? Obviously, the door doesn't open by itself. The wind came and blew the door open. Okay, as opposed to me succeeding in finishing it. And this is why I said I want you to imagine that you're this person, because what do you want so much? Do you want to get it done, or do you want to show I was successful in getting this done? Okay, so it's a fascinating machloket, and that becomes a machloket Beit Shamai Beit Hillel according to this. Beit Shamai Savre. Why do they say I'm a Nazir? Because what do they say? The whole purpose, the whole point of what he was trying to get at is, I can do this myself. And you didn't do it yourself. So basically, that was not a fulfillment of what you were trying to do. Ubeit Hillel Savre, Mishum de Raviyahu. What do you mean, Beit Hillel says, what are you talking about? You just wanted that cow to get up. You didn't care if you did it yourself. It's true you worded it in the language of if I get this cow to get up, but in the end, all you really wanted was the cow to get up, and the cow got up. So your challenge was achieved, and therefore you're not a Nazir. So basically, this sounds pretty reasonable. Again, in a certain way. So you basically are having this fascinating and really fascinating machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. When you say, I'm going to succeed in getting this done, and someone else does it, is that considered that you were successful or not? And how much is machoism fit into this picture. That's why I say it kind of depends what kind of person you are. Some people, it's all about, I want to show everyone I can do it. And some people just really want the totza'ah, right? The result, not the action. This is a good chiluk between action and result, right? Is it the action of you doing it, or is it the result that you want the cow up? However, you know that this is already going to get rejected because I told you. So now what's the problem with this? Ihachi ema seifa. But wait, look at the last line in the Mishna. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Av kashamru Beit Shamai, lo amru ela be'omer harei alai korban. Para mi kamat pispa midi. Wait a minute. We have a problem now. What did you say? I'm going to be a Nazir from wine. Now, why did we start before about the whole thing about the meat? Why did we start with the meat of the cow? Why are we thinking this had to do with the meat of the cow? Because Rabbi Yehuda's reaction was, if you said what I really meant is that the meat is going to be a korban, the cow is going to be a korban, then the cow will be forbidden by a vow, but there's no nizirut. That's what he says, Beit Shamai says. If the focus of your neder is on the wine, will be a nazir from wine, well, then there's nothing about the cow that ends up getting sanctified here, according to Rabbi Yehuda. You said what I really meant is it'll be a korban. What'll be a korban? Not the wine will be a korban, and not the cow, because your focus wasn't on the cow. So it doesn't make any sense, Rabbi Yehuda, according to this explanation, that the subject is the wine, that I'm going to be a nazir from wine. So because of that, they reject this explanation, and that's why I said it seems like they're just editing out this word instead of wine, fill in basal, okay? And then we're back to, now we have again, we're now in the first option of Rava, he said meat, but we rejected it for other reasons. Now we're in a different reading of it, but use substituting meat for wine. So now option number 4, again, third option of Rava, it seems, although you don't see the words Ela Amarava, but Ela, it must be Kigon de Amal, Hareini Nazir Mibsara Im Lo Amda V'Amda Me'ela. So same case as before. It's just that you said, I'm going to be a Nazir from the meat of the cow, if I don't get the cow to stand up myself. So now we have to play this all out and see if it works. You already know it's going to work, but we are going to have a bit of a question that we're going to have to resolve. And then, again, Amda Me'eleha, what happened? In which case are you a Nazir according to Beit Shamai? If the cow actually stood up on its own. So, Beit Shamai Save Torpe Da'u Gavra Mishum Ukba V'Yadehu V'Halo Ukma. Again, Beit Shamai is going to say, you meant to be a Nazir. You're going to be a Nazir because, in the end, remember, the whole thing was, I'll be a Nazir if I don't succeed in getting what I want done. And you didn't succeed because the cow got up on its own. And you were trying to say, I'm going to do it myself. And Beit Hillel Savre, Torpe Da'u Gavra Mishum de Revia V'Hakama. No, in the end, all you wanted was the result. The animal got up. And in the end, you got what you wanted, which is why you're not going to be a Nazir. Because again, remember, the first 2 options we had were, I'm going to be a Nazir if I succeed. And this option is, I'm going to be a Nazir if I fail. And Beit Hillel doesn't view this as a failure. But what's the problem? There's 3 possibilities of what could happen in this case. You said, I'll be a Nazir if I don't get the animal to stand up. So we have option number 1, you got the animal to stand up. You're definitely not a Nazir. No one thinks that because you got the animal to stand up. And you only said, I'll be a Nazir if I don't get the animal to stand up. Option number 2, the animal stands up on its own. If the animal stands up on its own, then according to Beit Shamai, you're a Nazir because you didn't accomplish what you wanted, right? This is the machloket. According to Beit Hillel, you're not a Nazir because in the end, you did get what you wanted, which is the cow to get up. What's going to be option number 3? What if the cow never stands up? So now, according to both Beit Shamai and Beit Hillel, what should happen? Right? According to Beit Hillel, your action wasn't achieved. You wanted, right? You had this challenge. You're going to get this cow to get up. You didn't care whether it was you or the cow stood up on its own. But, by the way, cow standing up on its own could also be someone else picks up the cow. Anything that's not you. But this cow stays on the ground. You become a Nazir according to Beit Hillel, right? That would be the meaning of this, because Beit Hillel says as long as you achieved your goal, which was just to get the cow up, you're not a Nazir. But if the cow doesn't get up, then you're a Nazir. Now that's a problem, though, according to this Lashon. If you said Nazir mi yayin, it would make a lot of sense. But what did you say here? Nazir mi basal. Now, what did Beit Hillel say in the previous Mishnah? if you say Nazir min agrogrot, I'll be a Nazir from figs, which doesn't mean anything. But Hillel says you're not a Nazir. Here you said, if the cow doesn't get up, or if I don't get the cow up, which means also if the cow doesn't get up, I'll be a Nazir from meat. And there is no such thing as a Nazir from meat. Now, Beit Shamai doesn't care because they're okay with that. Beit Hillel wouldn't allow that. So something doesn't jive with this explanation of the Mishnah. So we'll read it inside now. But wait. Oh, sorry, I have to go back one line. I skipped a line. Ubeit Hillel savre ilo kamat having Nazir. That's according to this, Beit Hillel would hold, if the animal doesn't get up, you're actually a Nazir. That's what's implied from everything we've been saying. But that can't possibly be, because if the words are, I'll be a Nazir from the flesh from the meat of the para, which we had to say because otherwise Rabbi Yehuda made no sense, then Beit Hillel now makes no sense. Because Beit Hillel is going to say, doesn't Beit Hillel hold mivsara lo havi Nazir? If you say from the meat, you're not a Nazir, because there's no such thing as forbidding meat to a Nazir. So the answer to this question, we actually have an answer, and this is where we're going to end our daf today. L'ta'amayu de Beit Shamai ka'amri. They're responding, and we see this many times, according to the logic of Beit Shamai. What they're saying is the following. L'didan, according to us, afilu lo nami lo havi Nazir. In other words, they're imagining this whole discussion between them, right? And we had Beit Hillel saying, he really didn't care. He just wanted the animal to get up. It didn't matter whether you picked him up, not picked him up. Beit Shammai said, no, you said you cared about yourself and your machoism. You wanted to get the cow up. So Beit Hillel says the following. According to me, even if the animal never stands up, you're definitely not a Nazir, because you said mibsara, and there's no such thing as Nazir from meat. It's just like the last Mishnah we had. But lididchu, but according to you, in other words, I'm going to argue within what you said according to your logic. I'll accept that you think Nazir mi basar is wine, could mean Nazir from wine and anything else, right? Even though you said meat, you really meant wine. You got confused or whatever, right? And we assume you don't just say things for no reason. In other words, again, I don't agree with you, but I'll allow you to argue with me about that point. So lididchu da amari to havi Nazir, you think that works as a Nazir? Odu li miha, but at least admit to me, in this case, what is fulfillment of the vow, right? What counts as fulfillment of the vow or not? So at least admit to me, at least admit to me that it's not all about machoism. This person just wanted the cow to get up. As long as the cow gets up, you're not a Nazir. So I don't think you're a Nazir no matter what happens. You think you're a Nazir as long as you think you're a Nazir if the cow got up on its own. But come on. Really, all he wanted was the cow to get up. That was what was important to him. Ubeit Shammai said, no, we don't agree with you about that. Lav torfe de hai gavra mishamukma biyadehu. Right? Oh, sorry, read it like this. Lav, no. Torfe de hai gavra mishamukma biyadehu. The most important thing this person wanted was to show I can do it myself, whether it was to show himself or to show to the people around. We don't know. It doesn't really make a difference. But he was trying to show I can do it myself. V'halo ukma. And in the end, he didn't succeed in doing it, and therefore he would be a Nazir. So we basically have three options of what could happen, and then a machloket between them about would you be a Nazir. So Beit Hillel is going to say you're never a Nazir, because this whole statement is a meaningless statement. But he says to Beit Shammai, but I think that according to your logic, though, that you are, again, there's two logics here. According to your logic that you are a Nazir when you say Nazir mi basal, still I disagree with you about what will be considered fulfillment of this condition or not. And like I said, it's a fascinating machloket here, because what you're really getting into is what's going on here with, when a person says something, right? And again, that's why I said, I want you to imagine you're in that moment of, I cannot fix this. And you're so determined, right? We all know, it happens to me a lot. You're in this situation. And then, like I can imagine my husband standing by me, he's like, just call the fix-it guy, no, I could do this, right? And you just want to prove, again, that's a question. Is it so important to you to prove that you can do it? Or is it so important for you just to get it fixed? And that's what's more important than whether you can fix it or it gets fixed on its own. So that's a really, really fascinating machloket. And we're going to end here for today and start with a new Mishnah tomorrow. Wishing everybody a great day and lots of food for thought today, or cows for thought.